The United Nations Security Council met to discuss the gas attack in Syria. During the meeting, Russian ambassador warned US of grave repercussions if it carries out an attack against Syrian government forces over reports of a deadly chemical attack. Meanwhile, American ambassador Nikki Haley called for a UN inquiry into the attack that killed dozens. Now, Syrians in Atarib and Idlib protested against a suspected poison gas attack in the rebel-held town of Douma. Demonstrators were seen carrying protest signs, some wearing face masks, to denounce the international silence over the suspected chemical attack. The International Chemical Weapons Watchdog opened an investigation to determine whether dozens of people were gassed to death in an attack near the Syrian capital, possibly by a poisonous cocktail of sarin and chlorine. British Prime Minister Theresa May has said that countries backing Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government should be held to account along with the Syrian leader. The suspected chemical attack over the weekend killed at least 60 people and injured more than 1,000. The Syrian government denied its forces had launched any chemical assault, and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said such allegations were false and a provocation. Human Rights Watch has said that a suspected chemical attack on civilians in Syria is a war crime that bears the hallmarks of Bashar al-Assad's government, but its ally Russia shares potential criminal responsibility for its use. They further said that countries should consider putting pressure on President Vladimir Putin ahead of Russia hosting the World Cup in June, as Assad was already a man who has no reputation left. Now, ahead of his appearance before the US lawmakers on April 11th, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has filed a written testimony apologizing for the missteps in handling data leaks. Zuckerberg has listed out steps his company is taking to protect its users from the data leaks. The FBI raided the office of US President Trump's longtime personal lawyer Michael D. Cohen, seizing records related to several topics including payments to a pornographic film actress. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan obtained the search warrant after receiving a referral from the special counsel Robert Mueller. Cohen's lawyers have called the search completely inappropriate and unnecessary. US President Donald Trump has said that the American economy will be much stronger after his government renegotiates trade pacts with China. The two countries have been threatening each other with tens of billions of dollars worth of tariffs. Claims that the current friction between the two nations was a direct result of US sanctions. The Deputy Commerce Minister of China has warned that Beijing is not afraid of a trade war. Now, Alibaba founder Jack Ma said that he believes there is no impending problem of trade deficit between the US and China. He was speaking with the International Monetary Fund Director Christine Lagarde on the sidelines of the Boao Forum in China's southern Hainan province. Lagarde said that some industries in advanced countries had been affected by free trade and measures have to be taken to tackle such effects. China and Mongolia have agreed to link the Belt and Road Initiative and prepare a road development initiative. Chinese Premier Li Qiang made the remarks while holding talks with Mongolian Prime Minister Ukhna Khureshuluk in Beijing. Li said that China and Mongolia are important neighboring countries, good friends and partners, and China appreciates the Mongolian government for reiterating its firm adherence to the One China policy. Parts of the Baltic Sea which is declared temporarily unsafe for the sea and air travel as the Russian Navy carried out a variety of drills. According to Russian Defense Ministry, the objectives of the drills were air defense target practice, diversion tactics, and radio-electronic warfare, among others. 4 battleships put the Navy's main missile systems to the test. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met expelled Russian diplomats and called their expulsion over a poisoning case in Britain was a provocation. Lavrov said Russia will not to cave in ultimatum and promised to find new jobs for the diplomats who returned to Moscow from over 30 countries. Relations between Russia and Britain have plunged to their lowest in decades since Russian ex-spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were found unconscious on a bench in Salisbury on March 4th. Britain blamed Russia for the poisoning while Moscow has denied any involvement. French police fired tear gas and stun grenades as they cleared eco-activists and anarchists from the site of a planned airport, since abandoned in western France. The site in Notre Dame had been squatted for years by opponents of the plan to build a €580 million airport, which the government decided to drop in January. Some 2,500 police officials took part in the evacuation. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe in Paris. The powerful young prince will be meeting French President Macron today. Conflicts in Yemen, Syria and the Iran nuclear deal feature high on their agenda. Prince Salman is not expected to sign major contracts in France as he did during visits to the United States and Britain over the last month. Now, hundreds of Portuguese soldiers who died on French soil 100 years ago during World War I were remembered at a ceremony attended by both countries' presidents. More than 7,400 Portuguese soldiers fighting for the Allied forces were either killed, wounded or taken prisoner by German troops during the Battle of Liz in April 1918. The Battle of the Lys was part of a German offensive that tried and failed to force Britain out of the war. Several hundred railway workers protested near France's parliament, where lawmakers were to start examining a bill reforming the state-owned railway company. Talks between workers and ministers have so far hit a wall. Some unions are stiffening their resistance, while the government has dug in its heels on the main aspects of its reform, which include the end of job-for-life guarantees for rail staff. After Prime Minister Viktor Orban's sweeping election victory, Hungary's ruling Fidesz party has signaled that it could push on with legislation to crack down on organizations promoting migrant rights as soon as Parliament reconvenes. The victory could embolden Orban to put more muscle into a Central European alliance against EU migration policies, working with other right-wing nationalists in Poland and Australia, and further expose cracks in the 28 nation bloc. A Brazilian Association of Criminal Lawyers requested that a Supreme Court justice issue an injunction that would free former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Lula began serving a 12-year sentence for bribery over the weekend. If the judge accepts the request and issues an injunction, Lula would be freed, though his decision would be temporary and have to be taken up by the full Supreme Court. Now, Houthi armed forces patrolled the Red Sea in boats armed with guns as UAE-backed forces approached Yemen's main Houthi-held port of Hodeidah. From the south, and the Saudi coalition doubled down on the Yemen coast. UAE wants to take control of Hodeidah, which handles the bulk of Yemen's imports, including fuel, medicine and aid. They say that the Houthis are using the port to smuggle weapons from Iran. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has confirmed that he will seek another term in elections next year. Buhari's candidacy was announced on Twitter. He took office in May 2015 after vowing to improve security and crack down on endemic corruption, but Africa's top oil producer fell into its first recession in 25 years in 2016, largely due to low crude prices and attacks in the Delta. 2 tourists were killed and 6 others were injured in a double-decker tourist bus that hit low-hanging tree branches in Malta. Local media reported that the branches may have been lower than usual because of damage from wind on Sunday night. The tourists were sitting on the open top deck of the bus. Rescuers had to use cranes to lift the injured on stretchers from the top deck. A series of shallow earthquakes shook parts of western Japan. Authorities have warned that further tremors are possible over the coming days. Quake of magnitude 5.8 shook parts of Shimane Prefecture on the Sea of Japan coast. 5 people were injured and over 100 houses lost their water supply in the city of Oda. An Indonesian court has jailed the mastermind behind last year's Islamic State-linked suicide bombings at Jakarta bus terminal for 9 years. Kiki Mohammed Iqbal was convicted of organizing the twin bombings in which 2 men blew themselves up using pressure cookers packed with explosives and killed 3 police officers and injured 12. At least 30 people, including 27 children, have died in an accident in India's northern part. The horrific incident took place in the hilly state of Himachal Pradesh. The bus was ferrying more than 40 kids home from school. 2 teachers and the bus driver have also been killed. Eyewitnesses say that the vehicle skidded as it rounded a corner before tumbling down the 200-foot deep gorge. Foreign Secretary Vijay Keshav Gokhale has reiterated India's commitment as development partner for Bangladesh. Gokhale has signed 6 memorandum of understanding between India and Bangladesh during his first ever visit to Dhaka and reviewed the progress of agreements between the 2 countries. Russia's ruble suffered its biggest daily fall in over 3 years on Monday. Stocks in major Russian companies also slid as investors reacted to a new round of US sanctions targeting some of Russia's biggest tycoons. The sanctions announced on Friday targets officials and businessmen close to President Vladimir Putin in an aggressive response to alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 US election. New York teenager Benji Foster won a $250,000 science prize for his mathematical model on the spread of late blight, the plant pathogen that sparked the Irish potato famine of the 1840s and 1850s. His model could be used to prevent crop damage in the future. According to Foster, late blight causes billions of dollars of damage and epidemics all over the world, and this can all be stopped if farmers have the adequate information as to how and when the disease spreads. Now let's take you through some stories from the world of sport. India's gold rush continued on day 5 of the Commonwealth Games in Gold Coast as the badminton contingent bagged their maiden mixed team gold by beating defending champions Malaysia in the final. India had missed out on a medal in this event at the 2014 Games in Glasgow, while their best showing so far was a silver in New Delhi. Now the history books have been rewritten. The Indian men's table tennis team has followed the women's team to be crowned Commonwealth Games champions in Gold Coast. India beat Nigeria 3-0 in the final to complete a historic sweep of the table tennis team events. This was India's second gold medal in the event and their first since the 2006 Games in Melbourne. Medals were aplenty in the individual events as well. Shooting ace Jeetu Rai finished on the top of the podium in the men's 10-meter air pistol event, with Om Prakash Mithalwal winning bronze in the same event. Rai led from start to finish, scoring a games record score of 235.1 in the final to pip Australia's Kerry Bell and win his second Commonwealth Games gold medal. Now, over in the women's 10-meter air rifle event, there was no gold medal for India but managed 2 podium finishes as well, with 17-year-old Mehuli Ghosh and Apurvi Chandela bagging silver and bronze respectively. A perfect 10.9 on her final shot saw Ghosh force a shootout with Singapore's Martina Veloso for the gold medal. However, she shot 9.9 while Veloso scored 10.3 to relegate Ghosh to the silver. Chandela, meanwhile, had to settle for bronze, finishing with a total score of 22.5.3. The medal rush has continued for India's weightlifters for the 5th consecutive day in Australia, with Pradeep Singh bagging the silver in the men's 105 kg event. Singh, one of the front runners in the category, had to settle for silver as Samoa's Senel Mao took the gold with a combined lift of 360 kilograms. Pradeep Singh's feat has increased the tally of India's weightlifters to 9 medals in 2018, including 5 golds. The torso armor Russell Crowe wore for his Oscar-winning role in Gladiator eclipsed expectations at a Sydney auction on Saturday, selling for $95,900 US. Sotheby's Australia's had estimated the stunt cuirass worn in the 2000 blockbuster would fetch between $15,300 and $23,000 US, but much of the movie memorabilia auctioned by the Australia-based New Zealander as part of his divorce settlement exceeded expectations. Comedian Bill Cosby was in a Pennsylvania court for the start of his retrial on charges of sexually assaulting a one-time friend who had thought of him as a mentor. Upon his arrival to the courthouse, Cosby encountered a topless protester chanting "Women's Lives Matter." She was quickly subdued and detained by police. Prosecutors have claimed that Cosby paid the sex assault accuser Andrea nearly $3.4 million in a 2006 civil settlement. A humpback whale stranded on Argentina's coast has died despite round-the-clock rescue efforts over the weekend that drew in dozens of volunteers. Video footage showed rescuers using buckets to soak the whale, while heavy machinery was used to clear sand on the beach in order to try to drag the whale back into the sea during high tide. A detonation of a silo in southern Denmark went spectacularly wrong after it fell in the opposite direction intended. No body was injured as the 53 meters silo at Vordingborg harbour fell, but it had damaged a small section of an adjacent library. The blast had been prepared for 6 months and an investigation has begun into what went wrong.